The silence before the stormed lights above the massive tech arena flickered like distant stars, as the hum of thousands of voices filled the air with nervous energy. Reporters tapped their pens. Influencers held their breath. And somewhere, backstage, Elon Musk stared at the glowing screen of his phone, unaware of the storm waiting for him beyond the curtains. The event was called Future World. It was supposed to be a celebration, a grand unveiling of breakthroughs in AI, green energy, and interplanetary travel. Elon had been invited as the closing speaker, the one everyone had come to hear. But as the hour grew near, a strange tension wrapped itself around the room like cold mist. Outside, protesters had gathered. They held signs, chanted slogans, and shouted accusations. They said Elon had grown too powerful, too rich, too disconnected. They said he had lost his humility. And some inside the hall seemed to believe it. Keanu Reeves arrived quietly through a side entrance. He wasn't on the official schedule. No one expected him. He wore a simple black jacket, a plain t-shirt, and jeans. He wasn't here for fame. He wasn't here for headlines. He was here for something else, something he hadn't even told. Elon. Backstage, Elon took a deep breath. He looked in the mirror. The same mirror he had looked into before launching rockets, making impossible bets, and building dreams most people laughed at. But tonight, he looked tired. Not just physically. Something in his eyes was different, like the fire had dimmed just enough for doubt to enter, sir. "You're on in 2 minutes," a stagehand whispered. Elon nodded, pocketed his phone, and walked toward the light. The announcer's voice echoed, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elon Musk." At first, there was polite applause, scattered uneven. Then came the whispers and the boos. They started low, a few voices. Then, more, louder, sharper, until they filled the entire auditorium like a rising wave. Elon paused at center stage. He didn't flinch, but his silence was heavy. He looked at the crowd, at the angry faces, the judgmental eyes, the people who once cheered for him now, pointing fingers. He opened his mouth to speak. And then someone shouted, "You've lost touch," at another. Screamed, "You don't listen." Someone threw a crumpled flyer onto the stage. Backstage, Keanu watched. He didn't blink. He had seen fame. He had seen hatred, knew what it was like to be misunderstood. But this wasn't about him. He stepped forward. The host noticed him and tried to stop him. "Mr. Reeves, you're not scheduled." But Keanu didn't stop. He walked calmly past the crew, past the shocked camera operators, past the stunned tech developers. His footsteps echoed louder than the boos. The audience saw him. First confusion, then recognition, then silence. Keanu Reeves, the quiet man known for kindness, your empathy, for never seeking attention, was walking onto the stage, and not to take the spotlight. He walked until he stood next to Elon. He didn't say a word. He simply placed a hand on Elon's shoulder, stood there. A full minute passed. No one moved. No one spoke. And then, slowly, the crowd changed. The boos faded. Someone near the front stood up and clapped. Alone, unsure, but brave. Another followed, and then another. Soon, the room that once echoed with judgment was filled with applause. Elon looked at Keanu. There was something raw in his eyes now. It's not pride, not gratitude, something deeper, something like recognition. The kind of recognition that only comes when someone stands with you not because they have to, because they believe in you when you no longer believe in yourself. Keanu finally spoke, softly to Elon, but loud enough for the audience to hear. "You don't have to be perfect," he said. "You just have to care." And for the first time that night, Elon smiled. Not the confident smile of a CEO. Not the strategic grin of a public figure. A real smile. A human one, and everything changed. Whispers in the green room the moment the two men stepped off stage. A wave of stunned silence followed them behind the curtains. People backstage didn't know what to say. A few clapped quietly. Others looked at each other, unsure of what had just happened. The shift in the audience had been so sudden, so complete, it felt almost unreal, like the air had been cleared by something invisible yet undeniable. Elon didn't speak at first. He walked to the green room with slow steps, as if the moment on stage had peeled something open inside him. Keanu followed beside him, not as a celebrity, not even as a friend, but as someone who understood. Inside the green room, away from the crowd, Elon sat down and exhaled. "I didn't think it would hit me like that," he said quietly. Keanu didn't respond right away, poured them both glasses of water and handed one to Elon. "You've been fighting for a long time," Keanu said gently. "Sometimes people don't see the toll it takes." Elon looked down at his hands. They were steady, but tired. "I thought if I just kept building, kept pushing forward, people would understand." He shook his head. "Like I'm just noise to them. Money, headlines, ego." Keanu leaned forward. "You're not noise. You're human. And sometimes the world forgets that." Outside the green room, the event continued. A new speaker took the stage, but people were still whispering about what they had just witnessed. Cameras had captured it. Social media was already flooding, with clips of Keanu's silent gesture, of Elon's broken expression, of the crowd's transformation. The narrative was changing. Meanwhile, one of Elon's assistants walked into the green room, holding a tablet. "Sir, Twitter and YouTube are exploding. People are calling it the most emotional tech moment they've ever seen." Elon didn't react to the news. Instead, he turned to Keanu. "Why'd you come up there?" Keanu sipped his water and paused before answering. "Because you needed someone to stand beside you. Not to speak for you, not to defend you, just to be there." Elon stared at him for a long second. "Do you think I deserve that?" Keanu nodded slowly. "I think everyone deserves one person who reminds them they're more than what the world says." The room fell silent again. But then Keanu did something unexpected. He pulled out a small, folded piece of paper from his pocket. "This isn't for the media," he said. "It's something I wrote down years ago, for myself. When I hit rock bottom, I keep it with me, just in case someone else needs it." Elon unfolded the paper. It was old, creased, worn from being read many times. The handwriting was simple. It read, "You are not your mistakes. You are not your fame. You are not your fears. We're the quiet reason someone else chooses to keep going." Elon read it twice, then once more. His eyes glistened. "Keanu," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "I've never told anyone this. But sometimes I don't feel like the person people think I am." "Maybe," Keanu replied, "because you've become too used to being seen from the outside. Tonight, they saw a part of you they'd forgotten." Just then a knock came on the door. It was the event organizer, Mr. Musk, Mr. Reeves. "We were wondering if you'd both be willing to sit for a short joint interview." Nothing scripted. Just honest conversation. Elon hesitated. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like performing. But Keanu looked at him with calm eyes. "Let them see you," he said. "Not the genius, not the billionaire. Just you." Elon nodded. The interview setup was simple. 2 chairs, 1 camera, and a quiet room. The interviewer sat with wide eyes, clearly aware something special was happening. No makeup team, no bright lights, just a raw moment waiting to unfold. "Mr. Musk," the interviewer began, "a few minutes ago, you were being booed by thousands. Now the internet is praising your vulnerability. How do you feel?" Elon took a deep breath. "Honestly," he said, "I feel human and a little scared." He turned to Keanu. "But also thankful, because someone reminded me that silence can be louder than words." Keanu smiled, but didn't interrupt. The interviewer then asked, "What would you say to the people who think you've changed, that you've lost your way?" Elon thought for a long moment before answering. "I'd say, maybe they're right. Maybe I did lose something. In the rush to invent, to build, to prove, I forgot to feel. But today I remembered," and that's when Keanu added, "The world needs vision, but it also needs heart. And when those two walk side by side, that's when the future becomes something worth building." The clip would later go viral, but in that room, in that moment, it wasn't about going viral. It was about something much quieter, something like healing. The night the internet breaketh sun had barely dipped below the horizon when the interview was uploaded. No grand premiere, no press release. Just a simple title. Elon and Keanu, a quiet talk. Within 10 minutes, the video crossed 10,000 views within an hour. It crossed 2 million, but numbers were not what made the world. Pause. It was the stillness. Elon Musk, the man known for rockets. Robots and tweets that could shake global markets had looked into the camera and said, "I'm scared." And beside him sat Keanu Reeves, the man who never chased headlines, simply listening. The comment section became a flood of raw honesty. People shared their own fears, their own doubts, their own loneliness. Some wrote, "I thought I was the only one who felt this way." Others said, "I didn't expect this to hit me so deeply." Across the world, people sat in their bedrooms, on buses, in cafes, watching that video with silent hearts and heavy eyes. Something in them had softened, and for many, something had begun to heal. Meanwhile, Elon sat in his hotel room. The glow of the screen cast soft shadows across his face. He wasn't checking analytics, wasn't tracking shares. He was reading the comments. "I never thought I'd cry because of Elon Musk." One comment read, "I used to think he was just another billionaire, but tonight he felt like someone's brother," said another. Elon leaned back in his chair. It was the first time in years that he felt like the walls around him were starting to crack. Not in a way that let things fall apart, but in a way that let light come in. A knock broke the silence. It was Keanu. He stepped in, holding 2 cups of tea. "I thought you might need this," he said, handing one over. Elon took it with a tired smile. "You always drink tea when things get emotional." Keanu shrugged, sitting down. "Tea reminds me to slow down." They both sipped quietly. Then Elon asked, "Did you expect this?" Keanu shook his head. "No, but I hoped for it." Elon looked at him, confused. "You hoped people would connect with this?" "No," Keanu replied. "I hoped you would." Those words landed like a soft knock on the heart. Elon looked away for a moment. "You know, I built everything to help humanity. Cleaner energy, better transportation, a future on Mars. But tonight, I realized, maybe I forgot to bring myself along with it." Keanu didn't speak. He just nodded slowly, letting the moment breathe. Then Elon added, "When I walked on that stage and heard the boos, it didn't hurt because they hated me. It hurt because a part of me believed they were right." Keanu set down his tea and leaned forward. People confuse success with distance. They think if you've made it big, you can't feel small anymore. But it's not true. Pain doesn't care about your net worth. Elon let out a shaky breath. That Keanu offered a quiet truth. Maybe after tonight they will. Later that night, something unexpected happened. A small envelope was slid under Elon's hotel room door. No name, no logo, just one handwritten sentence on a white card. "You changed my life, not because of a rocket, but because you reminded me that even giants can feel broken. Thank you." Elon stared at it for a long time. He didn't know who had written it, but for the first time in months, maybe even years, he felt like he didn't need to know. He picked up his phone and texted Keanu, "ALN. Want to go for a walk?" "Keanu, always." They met in the lobby. No security, no assistance. Just 2 men in jackets, blending into the quiet of night. They walked through the city unnoticed for the most part. The world was still watching their video, still reacting, still feeling. But in that quiet walk, Elon and Keanu talked about things no one had asked them before. Childhood fears, regrets, the moments they almost gave up. The weight of being seen by millions, yet feeling invisible inside. Keanu stopped at a park bench and sat down. There's something calming about knowing the world keeps spinning, no matter what storm you're carrying. Elon looked up at the stars. "I used to dream of escaping Earth, but maybe the real mission is learning how to live on it." Keanu smiled gently. "Sometimes, saving the world starts with saving one conversation." As the night wore on, two men, one known for machines, the other for movies, sat side by side under the stars, drinking tea and sharing silence. And though the world didn't see that part, it was the beginning of something deeper. Not just for them, but for everyone. Watching. The forgotten boy inside the manthe next morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows of Elon's hotel room. He hadn't slept. He had stayed up reading letters, not emails, not tweets, handwritten letters. His assistant had delivered a small box left at the event venue overnight. Inside were dozens of envelopes from strangers, from fans, from people who had never cared about Elon Musk before, but now felt something. Personal one letter came from a 15-year-old boy in Mumbai who said, "My dad works 2 jobs and always tells me to dream small. But after seeing you cry on stage, I want to dream big again, because even geniuses feel broken." Another came from a retired nurse in Texas who had lost her son in a car accident. She wrote, "Thank you for reminding me that it's okay to feel pain and still move forward." Elon read every one, not because he needed praise, but because he had spent years being a symbol, a brand, a disruptor, a man who reached for Mars, and now, for the first time in a long while, he felt like a person again. He was halfway through a letter from a single mother in Brazil when he paused her. Words cut deep. "I don't know you. But last night, when you stood there and didn't defend yourself, and when Keanu stood beside you, I saw my own son in you. He's 12. He tries so hard to be strong. But sometimes, he just needs to be held. Maybe you did too." Elon closed. His eyes' memories rushed back, his childhood in South Africa. The bullying, the loneliness, the nights he hid in books and machines because the world outside was too loud and too cruel. He remembered being that boy, trying so hard to be seen, but no one had stood beside him then. Not until now. Keanu Reeves knocked gently and entered. The room, he saw the open letters. He didn't say anything. He just sat down. Ellen looked at him. "I thought I was too far gone." Keanu tilted his head. "You weren't. I thought the world had decided who I was. They hadn't. And I thought being strong meant being silent." Keanu's voice was soft. "No, being strong means being real." They sat there in silence, 2 men who had seen the highest peaks of success, but were only now learning how to be vulnerable without breaking. Finally, Keanu said, "There's something I want you to see." He took out his phone and showed Elon a video. It was from a rehab center in Ohio. A counselor had played their interview for a room full of young addicts. Most of them hadn't spoken in weeks. But after watching it, one girl had stood up and said, "If someone like Elon Musk can say he's scared, maybe I can say it too." The camera shook as the room erupted into tears and hugs. Elon leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the screen in disbelief. I don't know what to say," he whispered. Keanu smiled gently. "You already said it, when you didn't try to be perfect." Elon shook his head. "But I didn't fix anything. I didn't solve their problems." Keanu looked him in the eyes. "Sometimes people don't need you to fix them. They just need to know they're not broken alone." Elon took a long breath. He looked down at his hands. Hands that had built rockets, shaped futures, and touched the stars. But now all he wanted was to touch hearts. "I want to do something," he said quietly. "Not just donate, not just build something real. Something with my hands, not just my mind." Keanu raised an eyebrow like, "What?" Elon thought for a moment. "I want to visit that center," he said. "No cameras, no news. I just want to sit with them. Maybe listen." Keanu nodded. "Then let's go." 2 days later, they arrived in Ohio. The director of the rehab center could hardly believe it. "Are you sure this isn't? It's the kind of place most people in your position visit." Elon just smiled. "That's exactly why we're here." They didn't give speeches. They didn't film content. They sat on the floor with a group of recovering teens and just talked. Lou shared stories he had never told publicly, of nights in college when he slept on the floor of a friend's dorm, of eating hot dogs for weeks because he couldn't afford rent, of moments he felt completely invisible. One boy looked up and said, "But you're Elon Musk. You're not supposed to be like us." Elon looked at him. eyes full of quiet truth. But I am like you. I just forgot for a while. Keanu placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. We all forget who we are sometimes. That's why we need each other. After hours of quiet conversation, the group hugged them both like they were family. And as they left, one girl ran up to Elon and slipped something in his hand. A tiny, folded piece of paper. When he opened it later, it read, "Your silence saved me. Thank you for not trying to be a superhero." Elon read it twice. Then he cried, not from pain, but from release, for the first time. He wasn't carrying the weight of being a symbol. He was simply human. When giants sit on the floor, they were back in California now. The world had gone quiet for Elon Musk, but not in a bad way. This time, silence didn't mean rejection. It meant peace. The headlines had shifted. They no longer called him a genius or a tyrant. They called him something else now, real. But Elon wasn't reading the headlines anymore. He was writing something. His fingers hovered over a small notepad. Not a laptop, not an app, just paper and pen. On the desk beside him sat a photo from Ohio. A blurry moment of him and Keanu sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by teenagers who once felt invisible. He remembered their eyes. He remembered their questions. And he remembered something he hadn't thought about in years, the way he used to draw spaceships as a boy. Not for fame, not for glory, but because he wanted to escape. Elon paused. Maybe that was the real mission, all along. Not to escape the world, but to escape the walls. We build inside ourselves. Keanu walked into the room, holding a folder. You're still thinking about them, aren't you, Elon? Nodded. I can't stop. Keanu handed him the folder. Then don't just think. Act. Inside were notes, contact details, and blueprints for something simple. A new foundation, not a tech lab, not a think tank. A place where broken people could rebuild. A center where they wouldn't be labeled as addicts, failures, or outcasts. But seen as humans? You came up with this, Elon asked. Surprised, Keanu smiled. You needed something. You could build with your heart. Elon flipped through the pages, therapy programs, creativity rooms, robotics labs for kids, even a small observatory for those who still dreamed of the stars. I don't want it to have my name, Elon said. This isn't about legacy. Keanu nodded. Then name it after someone who kept you going when no one else did. Elon froze. His mother's face came to mind, her hands, her sacrifices. The quiet nights she stayed up sewing clothes to pay bills while he built machines out of junk parts. He whispered, May. And just like that, it had a name. The May Initiative. A home for the lost. The hurting, the forgotten. Where no one would be judged. No dream would be too small. News of the project spread slowly. Not because it was hyped, but because people could feel it. This wasn't a marketing move. This was healing turned into architecture. One night, as they walked through the near-finished building, Elon stopped at the main hall. It had no stage. Just an open circle of beanbags and rugs. Keanu chuckled. So you're not putting in a podium? Elon shook his head. No podiums, no egos, just conversations. The walls were decorated with hand-drawn art, some from the kids in Ohio, some from volunteers. But one drawing caught Elon's eye. Showed a rocket, but not flying, landing, returning, and beneath it. In a child's handwriting were the words, "Even stars need to come home." Elon stared at it for a long time. He hadn't built this place to prove anything. He had built it because he was tired of running, tired of chasing approval, tired of hiding behind genius. He had built it because someone once stood beside him in silence, when the whole world turned its back. And that silence changed everything. As they left the room, Keanu turned and said, I don't think you realize what you've done. Elon glanced at him. What have I done? Keanu smiled. You built a place where giants can sit on the floor. And suddenly, that meant more than all the rockets in the world later that night. Elon sat alone in the observatory. He looked through the telescope. But he wasn't looking for Mars. He was looking for meaning in the sky. Saw stars, but in his heart, he finally saw himself. Not the billionaire, not the innovator, just alone. The boy who dreamed and the man who finally stopped running. The one who stood beside him's opening of the May initiative was not like any launch Elon had ever done. There were no fireworks, no laser shows, no celebrities reading from teleprompters. Just families, teachers, volunteers, and people who had once felt small in a world that moved too fast. A group of teenagers from Ohio had flown in. They wore t-shirts with one word printed on the front. Enough. Not as a complaint, but as a quiet declaration. We are enough. The ceremony began. With no red carpet, just a circle, dozens of chairs, arranged so no one stood higher than another. When Elon walked in, he didn't wear a suit. Just a plain gray hoodie and jeans. Keanu was already there, sitting beside a young girl sketching something on a notepad. He looked up, nodded, and smiled. No one introduced Elon. He simply sat down, waited a moment, and then stood. His voice was quiet but steady. When I was a child, I used to dream about escaping the world, he said. But I think the real dream is learning how to stay, how to be present, how to see people. He looked around the circle. This place isn't for the perfect, it's for the honest. And I'm here not as a leader, but as one of you. Someone who still gets scared, someone who still makes mistakes, someone who once forgot what it meant to be human. There was no applause, just deep silence. And in that silence, healing began. After the ceremony, people began to explore the center in one room. Kids learned to design robots. In another, young. Women were painting murals filled with colors that screamed freedom. Down the hall, a quiet boy named Theo sat alone, working on a tiny solar-powered car. Elon noticed him and walked over. Need help? Elon asked. Theo looked up shyly. I think the motor's stuck. Elon knelt beside him. Not as a genius, not as a founder, but as a man who remembered what it felt like to be a quiet boy with a dream. They worked side by side, heads down, fingers covered in grease. When the car finally moved, Theo's eyes lit up. You fixed it, he shouted. Elon smiled. We fixed it. Across the center, Keanu watched the scene through a window. Someone approached him, a journalist, who had snuck in hoping for a quote. Mr. Reeves? The reporter asked. Do you think Elon Musk has changed? Keanu turned slowly. His voice was soft. No, he said. I think he returned. Reporter frowned. Returned to what? Keanu looked back through the window. To who he was. Before the world told him who to be. That line would never be printed. It wasn't a headline, but it was the truth. Weeks passed, then months. The May initiative grew. Not because of money, but because of people. Real people who came not to be saved, but to find each other there. Were no social media campaigns, no promotional videos, just quiet stories of a mother who started teaching coding after losing her son, of a veteran who taught poetry to kids who didn't believe, in their own voices, and of a man named Elon, who kept showing up, sitting on floors, fixing broken parts not just in machines, but in people. One evening, Elon and Keanu sat on the rooftop garden of the center. Below them, laughter filled the halls. Music drifted in the air. Elon looked at the stars, but this time, he didn't want to go there. He wanted to stay right here. You saved me, Elon said suddenly. Keanu didn't respond at first. Then he said no. I just reminded you that it's okay to be seen. Elon nodded slowly, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out the old, folded paper Keanu had once given him, the one with the handwritten words, You are not your mistakes, you are not your fame, you are not your fears. It are the quiet reasons someone else chooses to keep going? Elon handed it back. Give it to someone else, he said. Someone who needs it now more than I do. Keanu folded it gently and placed it in his jacket pocket. The stars above them flickered, not in a distant, unreachable way, but in a way that felt warm, familiar, close, like home. And so, the story ended not with applause, not with a rocket launch, but with two men, one who built machines, one who listened, sitting under the stars, knowing that sometimes the greatest thing you can do for someone, is simply to stand beside them. When the world turns away,